I never thought of myself as someone who made decisions. I followed schedules. I restocked the medicine trays, changed the wound dressings, logged the vitals into the system, and went home on the transit line at the end of each shift. 31 years of nursing, and I had learned early on that the decisions, the real ones, the ones with consequences, happened above my pay grade and behind closed doors. I just showed up. I did the work. I kept things clean. That was still true the morning they wheeled the hatchling into Ward 6. The resettlement camp had been standing for 2 years by then, on the edge of what used to be a rail depot outside Varennes City. The Dracona Accord had come apart the previous winter. Politics I didn't understand and didn't try to. And the result, at ground level, was a slow river of dragon refugees through the processing tents. The medical block, the holding rows. My job was the medical block. I did not make the transfers. I did not sign the orders. I administered fluids, treated infection, changed dressings, handed the cases along when I was told to. The hatchling arrived on a Tuesday. It had no file number that matched anything in the system, which happens sometimes with the young ones. And it was listed only as pending transfer, Central Authority request. The camp director had told us, in the morning briefing, that we were to stabilize the transfer cases and hold them comfortable until the collection detail arrived. That was the word she used, collection. He was about the size of a large dog, this one, deep blue-green scales, the color of old copper, dueled by what I recognized as dehydration and a really fever that had been running through him for at least a week. His wings were folded against his body in that tight, deliberate way that meant pain rather than rest. He would not look at anyone who came near him. He lay in the cage. The cages were standard issue, metal-framed, adequate, and stared at the wall. And every time a step came close, he pressed himself smaller. I have seen that in patients before, the ones who have stopped expecting anything good from the next pair of hands. I started with fluids, because that was the clinical priority. I ran the line in carefully. He flinched but did not pull away, and then I sat on the floor beside the cage, because the stool put me at the wrong angle and I am too old to crouch. I had my lunch with me. I ate it there. I did not try to make eye contact. I did not talk at him. I just sat and ate and let him hear me breathing at rest. He looked at me after about 20 minutes, not with hope, assessments. The flat, careful look of a creature deciding whether to spend energy being afraid of something. I offered him part of the bread roll from my tin. I held it through the cage bars and waited. He did not take it for a long time. When he did, it was in one fast motion, pulling it back to the far wall immediately, and he ate it with his back turned. I logged his vitals, changed out the fluid bag, and finished my shift. I came back the next morning and did the same thing. Fluids. Pressing on a small laceration on his left foreleg that someone else had noted but not treated because the transfer cases were supposed to be held. Minimal intervention. I used the good gauze, the kind we were meant to ration for the long-term patients. I did not think about it much. It needed cleaning. I cleaned it. By the 4th day, he would take the bread directly from my hand. By the 6th day, he would let me rest my hand on the top of his head while I read the chart. He did not lean into it exactly. He did not lean away. He would close his eyes. His temperature had come down to almost normal. His wings had loosened. I was not supposed to give him a name. The transfer cases were not assigned names in the system. It was a paperwork convention that I now understand was deliberate, a way of keeping the ledger clean. But I called him Tav, which was nothing. Just a sound that meant I see you right here in front of me, not the file number on your cage. The collection detail was scheduled for the 14th day. On the 13th night, I stayed late. Told myself it was to finish the vacation rounds, which was partly true. I sat on the floor beside Tav's cage for an hour after the ward quieted, pressed his nose against the bars, and I scratched the ridge above his eye, the spot I had learned he liked. And he made a sound very low in his chest that was not quite a purr and not quite anything else. I did not make a decision. I want to be honest about that. There was no moment of resolution, no line I crossed. I simply sat there until it was late, and when I stood to go, I unlatched the cage. And when he walked out, I put a blanket on the floor in the corner behind the supply cabinet where the overnight camera angle did not reach, and I went home. In the morning, the cage was empty, and the blanket was in a heap, and the laceration dressing I had applied was sitting neatly on the edge of the shelf, removed, I imagined, with some care. The camp director was furious. There was a review. I told them the latch was faulty, which was not true, and produced no additional information, and eventually the review ended without conclusion, because no one seemed eager to press it further. The collection detail came and went. The line on the ledger closed. I went back to my rounds. 3 months later, this was autumn, the rail depot cold. The mornings gray over the marshes. I was in the ward, doing the 7 o'clock vitals when the door opened and everything went quiet. Not the usual morning quiet. The kind of quiet that is made of held breath. I turned around, she filled the doorway. That is the only way I can put it. Not physically, she had taken a form that fit the space. The scaled humanoid shape that the older ones used in enclosed structures. But she filled it in the way that a tide fills a room, in the way that a thing happens before you have time to name it. Deep violet scales, gold at the throat and the inner wrist, a bearing that needed no ceremony, because it was the thing ceremony was invented to approximate. She wore no insignia, I recognized. The 2 attendants flanking her had gone still and flat in the way that people go still and flat in the presence of something they do not question. The ward staff had stopped moving. I was the only one still holding a chart. She walked toward me. The room was very quiet. She stopped close enough that I could have reached out and touched the scales at her collarbone, which I did not do. She looked at me for a long time with eyes the color of amber, with something older moving behind them. Then she said, in a voice that was extremely calm and extremely clear, "He came home to us. He could tell us only one thing about the camp, only your name." I did not say anything. "He is the 4th son of the Vorra-keth second line," she said. "Here to the Ember Accord territories. He was taken during the transit disruption and held without our knowledge. We had been looking for 11 months. I held the chart. She reached into the fold of her robe and produced something small, which she held out to me. A disc of deep green stone, polished smooth, with a mark carved into the center that I could not read. She took my free hand and placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it gently, both of her hands, as if she were setting something down with care. "This is the mark of the Vorra-keth household," she said. "It means that in any territory under our authority, any world, any station, any transit line, any camp, your name is known. Needs are answered. No door closes to you. No one in our reach will fail to recognize what you are owed." She paused. "You gave him bread," she said. "You sat on the floor." I did not know what to say to that. I looked at the disc in my hand. "I was just finishing my rounds," I said. She held my gaze for another moment. Then she inclined her head. "Not a bow, something quieter than a bow. Something that felt more like the final word of a sentence she had been composing for a long time." And she turned and walked back through the doorway. The ward was silent for a while after she left. I put the stone disc in my coat pocket. I picked up the next chart. I finished the morning vitals. At the end of the shift on the transit line home, I turned the disc over in my fingers and thought about Tav pressing his nose against the bars in the dark, and the low sound he made that was not quite a purr, and the way he had eaten the bread from my hand with his back turned, as if he needed to be sure no one was watching him trust something. I put the disc back in my pocket and watched the marshes go by outside the window. It was enough to know he was home.